Welcome, everyone. I hope your week is off to a great start. Thank you. Thank you for choosing to spend time with me at home on this Monday. As always, we have a jam-packed show for you, and we're going to start today's show in the East African nation of Madagascar. The reason being, it's emerged that that country's president is touting a local herbal remedy as a cure for coronavirus. To be clear, there has been no disclosed scientific data to back that claim up. The World Health Organization itself has put out a statement in which they say they do not recommend self-medication and that there is no proven cure, and the search is on internationally to find a cure for coronavirus. Nonetheless, a number of African countries have placed orders for this tonic, including nearby Tanzania. We're going to take you to Tanzania in just a few minutes to bring you a live report from the capital, Dar es Salaam. Also ahead, the man that's leading Africa's response to this pandemic will be with us, Dr. John Nkengasong, who is the head of Africa's CDC. He is going to be with us on the show, sharing his thoughts on that tonic coming out of Madagascar and, of course, the state of the response to this pandemic in Africa. You will not want to miss what he has to say about all of this. And I'm going to introduce you to a man who is using animation to help children make sense of this very, very scary time. We have that story and so much more across the hour. I hope you can get ready, get comfortable, because let's get in. All right, now, as I said, there's a search underway for a cure to coronavirus and the devastation that this pandemic is causing across the world, across borders. In the US and in Europe, the conversation is largely focused on the search for therapeutic treatments, alongside the hope that we'll develop a vaccine quickly. That is where all eyes are on that scientific research, that coordination that we've been seeing across the globe. But in Africa, in Madagascar to be specific, the focus is lying elsewhere. There, that country's president is touting a locally made herbal tonic called COVID Organics and saying this drink, this tonic that is being produced in his country is the answer to the world's problems. He's saying it has curative and preventive properties, none of which has been supported by any evidence that has been disclosed publicly. He says in a speech that he gave on April 11th that his country has been chosen by God because they've had no deaths in Madagascar from coronavirus. It is also worth pointing out, just for context, that there have been no deaths in a host of other countries in Africa, including Rwanda, Western Sahara, Seychelles, South Sudan. There have been no deaths there. Nonetheless, President André Rajoelina of Madagascar says his country has been chosen by God because there are no deaths. He also adds that this drink is made from a plant called Artemisia, which is found in some malaria medications. And he says this is the way forward in terms of fighting coronavirus. It's troubling. It's deeply troubling. There's no data to back it up. The World Health Organization has been very clear. It does not support self-medication and says at this stage there is no cure for coronavirus. And yet we see a host of African countries, including Guinea-Bissau, putting in orders for this drink, including Congo-Brazzaville and nearby Tanzania. They've all placed orders for this COVID organics drink. Let's dig into this and see what's going on. I want to bring in Frederick Mwaka now. He is a journalist there in Tanzania, in the capital, Dar es Salaam, with Radio France, and he joins us now. Frederick, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So let me start by asking for the general reaction there in Tanzania to the word emerging that your president John Magufuli is going to send a plane to collect a batch of these tonics, these COVID organic herbal drinks that are purportedly the cure for coronavirus?
Well, there has been mixed reactions in Tanzania from several people, publics themselves, scientists, and even politicians who have taken this issue very seriously. But the president's statement on Sunday, when he was addressing the nation from his hometown in Chato, in northern western part of Tanzania, President Magufuli indicated clearly that his government is going to send a plane in Antananarivo to bring to Tanzania those medicine which has been discovered by and promoted by Madagascar government. But here in Tanzania, there has been a mixed discussion, as I said. But some people have been criticizing the government on how it handled the situation. But on the other end, the pro-government have been praising President Magufuli, saying that he has been a bold, he has shown the bold leadership, saying that Tanzania is part of Africa, and he is taking the direction of some of African countries which have already taken measure to take the Madagascar medicine to their countries, countries like Democratic Republic of Congo, Senegal, Togo, Congo Brazzaville, as you have mentioned earlier. President Denis Sassou Nguesso also indicated that his country is going to take the Madagascar medicine to cure people who have been so far affected by the disease. But here in Tanzania, as we know, more than 400 people have been found tested positive for this disease, and there has been a lot of debate that which the government is not taking serious measure. But I think President Magufuli is a panic. Yes.
Let me jump in right there as you set the stage there, because as you say, you have approaching 500 cases of coronavirus, 500 confirmed cases there in Tanzania. President Magufuli saying he's going to send a plane to get this batch of drinks. It's not been verified, so I'm not going to call it a medicine. It's not been verified by any disclosed scientific data that we're aware of, but these tonics. He says he's going to send a plane for them. This is the same president that also told people in Tanzania that they should pray away this disease. Give us some kind of perspective on what measures are in place to fight this virus. Bearing in mind, you have approaching 500 cases there in Tanzania.
Yeah, the government spokesperson, Dr. Hassan Abasi, has indicated that the government has taken 40 measures to curb the spread of coronavirus, including the closure of primary school, secondary school, as well as universities, but also making people, the government is telling people if they go outside, they must make sure that they use mask. But some people have been saying that this is not serious for the government, which for President Magufuli and his government, because other countries from the region have been taking a very restrictive measures, including Rwanda, Uganda, and of course Kenya, closing their borders and taking curfews and other measures. But it seems like Tanzania is not taking serious measures. But we must know also that President Magufuli.
Looks like Frederick just froze there for a second as he gave us an update on the situation there in Tanzania, where they have approaching 500 cases, 500 confirmed cases of coronavirus there, and their president now is sending a plane shortly to head to Madagascar to collect a batch of these tonics produced locally in Madagascar and being purported to act as a cure to coronavirus, even though there's been no disclosed scientific evidence, scientific data to support those claims. And also the World Health Organization itself said in a statement over the weekend that they do not support self-medication and stressed that there has been no found cure to coronavirus. Sadly, we lost Frederick Nwaka, who's a journalist from Radio France based in Tanzania, but I think we get the picture that they're in country, mixed reaction to President John Magufuli's decision to go down this route with the herbal tonic. But to give full context, he's not the only African leader to make that decision. As you heard from Frederick, that Senegal has ordered it, Congo Brazzaville, also Guinea-Bissau have all placed orders for this tonic. I want you to stay with me so you hear what the head of Africa's CDC has to say all about it. You'll hear from him shortly, his thoughts on this move by African leaders. But before we go down that road, I want to bring up the numbers for you to give you a check of where things stand on the continent right now in terms of coronavirus cases. It's the start of the week. Let's give you the full picture. These numbers are collated by Johns Hopkins University, and you'll see that confirmed cases have topped 44,000. 44,909 at last check is what we were getting from Johns Hopkins University in terms of total numbers of confirmed coronavirus cases on the continent, just over 44,000. Active cases, those stand at 28,156, and the number of deaths, 1,809. Now, worth pointing out, as we were just talking about Madagascar, that they have 149 cases there in that country, and Tanzania, of course, we just mentioned, approaching 480, approaching 500. The thing that I want to stress with these numbers is that there is a lag. There is a lag in reporting. There's a delay in the time that countries report so that the numbers are up to date. So when you look at these numbers, 44,909 total confirmed coronavirus cases on the continent, that's not the full picture. It's not the full picture. We're not testing enough because we're not able to. And those who are testing aren't reporting, right there on the minute. So there is a lag. To give you, just before we move on, some additional context, again, the country of greatest concern currently on the continent is South Africa. 6,783 cases in South Africa. 6,783. Lesotho nearby, no cases reported. So that's a snapshot of where we are on the continent right now. If you remember one number today, it's that confirmed cases at this moment in time are over 44,000, and we're approaching 45,000 cases on the continent. So I want you to take note of that number, and we're going to check the number several times for you across the show. And of course, every week we're going to bring you up to date with the situation there on the continent. As I give you those numbers, I also want to take a pause and ask you to send your thoughts. This show is about our continent, our communities. It's about us. And your voice and what you're experiencing right now with this pandemic is key to this show. And so while we bring you the voices of academics and national leaders and innovators and celebrities, your voice is actually the heartbeat of this show. So I want to take this moment now to ask you to send in your thoughts. I'm going to get to them throughout the show as you write into us here on the show. But more than that, we want to hear your voices. So we're going to start asking you to send videos wherever you are on the continent, in the diaspora, whatever your experience is of this pandemic, however it's affecting you in big ways or small ways, send us your videos. Send us your videos, and what we want you to do is say your name, which country you're from, tell us whether you're working, if you're unemployed, are you a student, whatever it is that you're doing day to day. Give us some context for your comments and send those into us. Send those into the show. We're going to share an email with you and send those into us so that we can share them with everyone. Everyone around the world can get a sense of what we are facing on the continent. So that's important. It's important that your voice is heard because this is a conversation. It's a conversation not just between me and the guests who we invite onto the show, but a conversation between me and you, wherever you are. So we want you to send those messages to our Facebook group. Just shoot your video, no more than 2 minutes, and we're going to get them on the show. All right, this is a chance to hear your voice on the show daily. We want to make that something that that when you come to this show, Home with Isha Sesay, you hear not just from leaders, but you hear from people on the ground across the continent, Africans in the diaspora. So let's do that. Let's make that something that we do here on Home with Isha Sesay. We're going to keep an eye out for your messages. Send them to our Facebook group. Moving on. It's been hard to come by the full picture of what's happening on the continent in terms of those numbers. I just told you 44,909 total confirmed coronavirus cases at last check. But we know that isn't the full story. We know that's not the full story because we're just not able to test. And we know that it varies across the continent in terms of inability to test. Some countries are doing better than others. We know that in terms of mortality rates, some regions are suffering more deaths than others. In Northern Africa, we're seeing far more people die there than in other parts of the continent. We wanted to get answers to the many, many questions that we have about this pandemic response on the continent. So we tracked down Dr. John Nkengasong. He's the head of Africa's CDC. He's the man with the answers. He's the man coordinating the response. We caught up with him a little bit earlier, and I started the conversation with him, the only place you can start a conversation about the response, and that's with testing. Take a listen to what he had to say. Dr. John Nkengasong joins us now from Addis Ababa. Dr. Nkengasong, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be on your show.
Let me start by asking you about testing on the continent currently. I think by your estimate, there have been 750,000 tests for a continent of 1.2 to 1.3 billion. And you've been blunt. You said that due to a breakdown in global cooperation, Africa has essentially been shoved out of the diagnostics market. My question to you is, where does that leave our fight in this pandemic?
I think it leaves us with a very constrained options to fight the COVID-19 pandemic. It doesn't allow us to be ahead of the pandemic, which is what we should be doing now, that is testing, isolating people that are positive and tracing their contacts. So I think very clearly with 750 tests done on a continent of 1.2 billion, if you divide that and square that per million people, it gives you not more than about 600 tests per million people. So you cannot, it doesn't enable you to do the kind of things that we are known to be critical in blunting this pandemic on the continent. So I think we have to improve our game and cooperate more with the international community if we have to be ahead of the pandemic.
But this is not due to a lack of cooperation with the international community, as I understand it. This is about national governments keeping what they have, borders being closed, and a logistics nightmare. Am I correct?
Absolutely, that is what it is. But we have to understand that that we are at war with COVID-19, which means that we local battles won at each country level, but the victory has to be global. In other words, the world will be in a very difficult place if COVID is controlled in any part of the world except Africa, a continent of 1.2 to 1.3 billion. So I think that is where we have to give some considerations and say, look, we have to conceive this more globally and have a coordinated plan of attack to control the virus.
How significant is the breakthrough at the Pasteur Institute in Senegal that's been working with the British company Mologic to produce these dollar tests with a quick turnaround for results? How significant is that for Africa's fight? Is that our effective weapon, if you will?
Local manufacturing of diagnostics on the continent is always welcome, and is something that we should be striving for in the context of overall health security for the continent. There are three things that you need to control a pandemic. You need to diagnose, you need a vaccine, and you need treatment. So if Africa is not producing any of those, then you are extremely exposed and vulnerable. So we welcome the initiative in Senegal to produce the test, but I just want to be sure that people understand that this is still a prototype test, which means it still has to be validated, evaluated, and then brought to scale. So it's not like you can go to Senegal today and buy the test. We have similar initiatives going on in Kenya at the KEMRI, the Kenya Medical Research Institute. You also have a similar initiative going on in Morocco. So this is one of the outcomes of this crisis, where countries are beginning to fall back and say, hey, look, we have to be able to produce our own diagnostics. So, but we are not yet there.
Okay. Do we know how soon we will be there?
Well, maybe in a couple of months, or next 1 month or 2 months, we should be able to have the test validated, know that it's performing well. Then the next question is, how do you bring that to scale? Because you have to be able to produce millions of them fairly quickly, consistently, to support the efforts on the continent.
I want to talk to you about modeling, because the reason I started with the issue of testing is because we need to set the stage for how bad things could get in the absence of scaled up testing. The models vary. I know that the Economic Commission for Africa put out something. Imperial College of London has also looked at some numbers, and they're scary numbers. We're seeing, in some cases, best case scenario, up to 300,000 people could die by this year, much larger numbers going forward. Let me ask you, first of all, how reliable is the testing at this stage in your view? Where are you looking for the data to guide, projections?
That's a very good question. I think as Africa CDC, we look at all those models, and we are comparing them and looking at the assumptions that underline them. All models are just as good as the assumptions are. And the one limitation that you have across the board is the lack of testing. If you were able to have a better coverage in testing, that you can plug all of that into the appropriate into a model, and it gives you a more or less accurate projection there. Now, if some of those models that we saw in January had predicted that by Easter we'll be probably having 20,000 cases in certain countries in Africa, we haven't seen that happen. So I think there's an inherent flaw in a lot of the models that we have seen across. That's why we are very cautious as Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention to be endorsing any model and projecting those numbers in public. We know that we're dealing with a dangerous virus. We know that we're dealing with a treacherous virus that seeds itself quickly and can overwhelm the system. So I think our best efforts is to focus on trying to limit the transmission as much as possible, because we know that our best winning formula is the ability to prevent transmission, not to wait until people die. I think that is clear. So the models are a model. In New York City, we know that models just were not as good as they thought it was. So I think we recognize that those projections are out there, but we are not basing our efforts on those models.
With that being said, you said very clearly a few seconds ago that the focus has to be on the diagnostics. It has to be on the testing, getting the results, and deciding whether people have to be isolated, contact tracing. We know the formula. That being said, that being widely known and acknowledged by Africa CDC and the WHO, I have to ask you about this uptake by a number of African countries in reaching out to Madagascar to secure supplies of a locally made herbal tonic purported to have curative and preventive properties. Let me ask, first of all, for your response to that, and whether this is something that is being supported by Africa CDC, this move by African governments to go in this direction.
I think, thank you for that question. It's very important question. I mean, we have to keep an open mind as we respect to the tools that are available to fight this terrible pandemic. As I said earlier, we are at war, and you go to war with all the weapons that you have, not the weapons that you need. Having said that, I think there are certain basic things that we must continue to respect, which is the standards of which any tonic or medication or any claims are evaluated. There are two things that we have to look at: the safety of any medication, tonic, or regimen that people put out there, and the efficacy of that. Now, we haven't seen the data for Madagascar, the scientific data that speaks to how safe this product is and how effective the product is. That we've reached out to the government of Madagascar, and I was on the call with the president and other head of states, and he spoke very passionately about it. We've reached out to the government of Madagascar through their embassy in Addis Ababa and said, look, let your scientists come talk to us, open the books, we see what the data look like, and we'll be happy to enrich that partner, develop and expand the studies if the data is insufficient. So at this point, we have not seen any data from that, and we remain optimistic that the government of Madagascar, through its scientists, will engage the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and then we can understand what is going on.
Do you have concerns that such a move, in the absence of the scientific data to back up the passionate claims made by President Rajoelina, do you have concerns that, on the one hand, you have governments saying we're making these decisions to lock down or put curfews in place because of the science, because the science tells us that's the best way to fight this, and then on the other hand, turning around and purchasing tonics that don't have science backing them up? Do you have concerns about the lack of message discipline, or certainly the signal that sends to local populations?
So I think let it be very clear that we don't know that they don't have the data. We haven't seen the data.
Well, undisclosed. Let me correct myself. Undisclosed.
So exactly. So we are looking forward to that interaction, scientific interaction, in a standard way and in a very transparent way. I think when we see the data, we know how good the data was. Then we also look into the design of how did they design that study, because we know that there are less than 200 COVID cases in Madagascar, and if you put even everybody on that, I mean, what you call sample size will still be very limited. So we are approaching that with an open mind, but we're saying that everything should be informed. The battle against COVID will be won by good science. I mean, and only good science will allow us to come out of this. Good science that guides treatment, good science that guides vaccine development, and good science that would guide standard public health practice.
The easing of lockdowns in certain places on the continent. Nigeria on this Monday is beginning to ease the lockdown in Lagos and Abuja. What is the CDC's position? Is there criteria that is being shared with African governments to guide them in the decision making? I mean, certainly this is also the day here in the United States where a ton of states are opening up well before we've seen the cases start to dip, and that many scientists say it is safe to make such a move. What is the level of conversation, cooperation between Africa CDC and local African governments with regards to when to ease up, when the lockdown should end or go on?
No, we are in discussions with the governments, and as many countries, of course, we understand the economic pinch and the economic pressures under which they are. But we should always remember that, again, as I indicated, that our decisions should be guided by good science behind it. Now, we have to have certain conditions in place there. That can we test, expand our testing? That will allow us to determine, when you unlock the system, to determine where the concentrations of those outbreaks are, and you test people, isolate it, and remove them from circulation, and so that you do not put the whole investment that you've actually locked down countries for weeks, and then suddenly you unlock them, and then the infection spreads. History teaches us that errors have been made in the past, and if you look back into the history of pandemic, in 1720, the Great Marseille plague was resulted because of oversight in doing certain basic public health things, and it led to half the population of the city decimated by plague. So we should be extremely careful with what we're dealing with. This is, again, a dangerous virus that is spreading in a very, very significant way. So, I mean, you have to have the ability to test. You have to have the ability to track the people that are tested. You have to have the ability that, yes, your hospital systems can admit people, okay, in a way that you treat them, take them out of the hospital care and bring in new people there. So some basic conditions must be fulfilled before you begin to unlock the systems there.
As we look ahead, it's the start of a new week. What is it that is concerning you the most? What will you be looking at over the next 7 days? What are the markers? What are you looking at to kind of guide what comes next over the next 7 days?
First of all, the next 7 days, we are looking at data across the continent. We just started today looking at the data across all 55 countries, at least those that have been affected, to look at what you call the rolling average. I mean, are we going up? I mean, as a continent, and then you break that into regions to see which regions, how the dynamics and the movement of this the virus per region. I mean, that is important because it will allow us to understand if we are making gains in certain regions of the continent versus other regions, and we are seeing trends. We are seeing trends that we've seen upward movement or increases ranging from 30% to 50% by region. So we're looking at that. And why is that important? It will allow us to tailor our messaging and efforts to that region of the continent. We just had a coordinating meeting of ministers of health about 2 hours ago. I mean, a very good meeting, which we do hold every Monday to coordinate efforts, bring all the 5 regions together and discuss common strategies there. So we are looking into that. We're also looking into how do we pool resources for procurement of the test. We cannot just talk about lack of access to the test. We have to talk about what do we do to unlock the supply chain management for the diagnostic test. And so those are some key things that we are looking at. Again, to support the initiative that we launched 2-3 weeks ago called a partnership to accelerate COVID testing. We have to have a pool procurement mechanism. That way we don't go to the manufacturers as with smaller orders from individual countries, but we go there as a bulk for bulk purchasing there. So those are the kind of things we are looking at this week very, very carefully.
Dr. John Nkengasong, we wish you the very best. Thank you for all the work you're doing. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for having me on your show.
A very important conversation there, Dr. John Nkengasong, in which he spells out clearly the challenge for Africa. I think one of my biggest takeaways from speaking to him, the fact that we've only done about 750,000 tests on the continent when we have a population of between 1.2 to 1.3 billion people. When you break that down, it's roughly about just under 600 tests per million. It's not enough. It's not enough to have any full sense of what the situation truly is on the continent with regards to the spread. In terms of Madagascar, I just want to repeat what he said. Of course, a lot of people talking about that story on this Monday that President Andry Rajoelina of Madagascar is now shipping out his tonic, COVID Organics, his herbal tonic to a number of African countries, including Tanzania, Guinea-Bissau, Senegal, a number of countries taking receipt of these drinks that he says possess a preventive, curative property. You heard Dr. Nkengasong say there, they're going to keep an open mind to these things, but at the end of the day, they've got to be guided by science. They've got to be guided by data in terms of the efficacy, in terms of the safety of any kind of medicine, any kind of tonic. And as yet, none of that has been presented to Africa's CDC. They've reached out to Madagascar through their embassy there in Addis Ababa. He has had a conversation with the President Rajoelina of Madagascar, and they're asking to see what scientific data that can be verified, what do they have that supports these claims. Until then, it is not something that we can go around saying works. There's no data that has been disclosed to date that support the claims made out of Madagascar. So you heard Dr. John Nkengasong there. Let science inform what we do here. Let good science inform the decisions that are made on the continent. I want to get to your comments. You have been writing in, and I'm so grateful that you are choosing to spend your time with me on this Monday. We have people from all over sending their comments. We've got Accra in the house, Amadou Bailabar, thank you. Rosemary Bangura also with us, thank you. I'm guessing Rosemary Bangura is from Sierra Leone, it's just a thought. Also getting comments, Mbalu Toure, watching from Texas as a Sierra Leonean, welcome, thank you for being here. Adejo Victor David, I asked which data is WHO looking for in this global emergency? I think as much data as they can get their hands on is going to inform the picture that we're able to paint of this global emergency. This comment coming from Matilda Jalla, happy Monday to all. Also we have people here from Dar writing in, Aiden Mukundala, thank you for joining us. Sal Mose, Africa not testing the virus in the communities, and lots of people just saying that they really appreciated the conversation with Dr. Nkengasong. A lot of people also writing about the situation in Madagascar. Again, as I say, We don't have any data to support that it actually works. And I'm sure when that information emerges, we'll get Dr. Nkengasong back on the show to share it with us. Okay, moving on. Thank you for your comments. As always, keep writing in. Moving on, though. A recent report in the Washington Post, you may have seen it, it came out last week. A recent report read like something out of a horror movie. A number of patients in their 30s and 40s infected with coronavirus have shown up and had shown up with strokes caused by large blood clots. According to the Washington Post, the median age for that type of severe stroke is 74. And here we are seeing people in their 30s and 40s infected with coronavirus and having strokes caused by blood clots. I want to read you a little bit of what one of the doctors interviewed had to say in that same piece by the Washington Post. Let me read it to you. They're referring to the neurologist began the procedure to remove the clot. He observed something he had never seen before. On the monitors, the brain typically shows up as a tangle of black squiggles spot. As he used the needle-like device to pull out the clot, he saw new clots forming in real time around it. He removes the clot and new clots form in real time while he's looking at the brain. Why? Why is this happening? We want to dig into this and get a little bit more sense of what we may be looking at, why this virus is moving through the body in the way that it is. It is so scary. Joining us now to share his perspective on all of this is Dr. Murray Rafiu. He's a neurosurgeon with extensive experience in spine and neurosurgery. It's also, for full disclosure, worth pointing out, he's also a dear friend of mine. So I should say that. Dr. Murray, welcome. I think you might have to unmute yourself. Or is it us?
There we go.
There we go. Welcome. It's good to have you with us.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So, first of all, let me ask you your thoughts on that Washington Post article as a neurosurgeon. What did you make of it?
Well, I mean, the very interesting part of it, I think you alluded to earlier, is the fact that this is showing up in young people. And another thing about that very article that they pointed out was the fact that a lot of these people who are presenting, and most of them were, actually all of them were COVID positive, were not seeking help for a couple of reasons. One, they're afraid of going to hospitals to get help, but also their symptoms were relatively mild. So they were not super sick COVID patients. So, they may have a bit of a, cough here and there, not enough for them to be so worried about. But then they start to develop these stroke symptoms. And some of them were actually presenting even later, which presents a certain amount of danger because one thing we say is time is brain. So when brains start to get an infarct, and that is the blood supply is being cut off, the sooner you get to help, the better your chances of recovery. And go ahead.
I mean, but why would a disease that is a respiratory illness, as we understand it, essentially, when it first impacts the body, why would it progress? I don't know. I don't even know the trajectory of this disease, but why would we be seeing strokes as part of its impact?
Well, I mean, one of the things you have to look at is actually what the virus does even to the lung. It's an inflammatory process that it initiates in the lung. And one of the areas that one of the organs it affects is the blood vessels, even in the lungs. So there's what you call almost like an endothelial dysfunction, as well as vasculitis, which is basically inflammation of the blood vessels that happens in the lung. And we're beginning to think that this is really an extension of that, right? Where you actually are getting this kind of vasculitis and endothelial dysfunction in the brain as well. And that can cause, that coupled with the fact that most people who are also COVID positive can be hypercoagulable. And that is they tend to form clots faster. So the combination of those two are probably playing a role in why we're seeing this kind of big vessel disease, because usually vasculitis manifests as stroke in smaller vessels as opposed to big vessels. So I think a combination of hypercoagulation and the vasculitis causing you to have these kinds of things. Again, we don't have all the answers quite yet because it's fairly in the process. So we need a little more studies to actually understand what is happening. If you look at Wuhan,
go ahead.
If you look at Wuhan, actually, so the idea that stroke or people who already had previous stroke were at higher risk of complication in COVID is not new. That has been documented in Wuhan, but in Wuhan, the majority of the patients were actually 55 and above that they found, and actually out of that group, the majority were still even in their 60s, 70s, and all of that. So seeing that in 30, 40-year-olds are quite new in general.
The thing that I was struck by, again, just as a layperson, was the fact that, as I read in that piece, when the neurosurgeon was operating, that clots were forming in real time. Is that something you've ever seen before?
No, I mean, he actually was, I think the person that you're referring to is the neurointerventional radiologist. So one of the advances that have been in stroke, and I don't know if the audience all know that, is the ability to actually go and retrieve the clot, going starting with the groin and kind of navigating the needle coil into the brain and trying to pull the clot out to revascularize the area. And normally it's in the big vessels that you find these things. Clots that are in smaller vessels tend to not really respond to this because you can't really get the needles to those places. And so the way you treat those is to actually, if they get in early enough, is to give them an IV medication, which is a TPA, to try and break down those clots. The situation with this is that I think some of the peripheral clots are also forming outside of the big vessel ones, right? It's like the smaller ones are also getting clots, which is interesting because if that happens at a very critical place, like the brainstem, the effect can be actually quite devastating. So this, you can have a small clot that feeds the brainstem, a small vessel that feeds the brainstem. If that vessel gets clotted, it could be devastating, probably more so than a relatively bigger vessel that affects, say, the frontal lobe, for example.
And to that point, I was going to ask you about the chances of recovery from clots causing strokes in people who are relatively young, in their 30s and 40s.
So as a general principle, young people tend to do better when they have strokes than older people. That's well documented. The key to all of this is the time to intervention. How fast do you get to intervention? Because once the brain dies, you're not going to get it to, even if you revascularize, it's just not going to come back.
And what do you mean when you say if you revascularize? You mean take it out?
Exactly. You take it out or you give them a TPA to break down the clot. The time to intervention is extremely important, not only in terms of the ability of the brain to recover, but the ability for some of these interventions to be done at all. For example, giving TPA to someone outside the prescribed time period, for example, can potentially lead to bleeding because now you are causing a dead brain to now see where the vessels are themselves becoming weak. Now you're giving a way for clots not to form, which then can cause it to bleed. So a lot of timing becomes extremely important in this process. So a young person, be it young or old, that has any kind of symptoms that could be construed as stroke needs to get to help as soon as possible.
Dr. Murray, thank you so much. I know that you're also playing your role in Africa's fight against coronavirus. We're going to get you back to talk about that next week, about what you're doing as part of the response. But thank you for making time to talk to us about strokes and this dreadful development. We appreciate your insight. Thank you, friend.
Thank you for having me. See you next week.
See you next week. Take care. I think there's so many questions still to be answered, as you'll hear people say over and over again with regards to this coronavirus. There's just still much to be discovered. Murray made the point that we had seen that coronavirus or COVID-19 positive individuals in Wuhan were suffering from strokes, but they were older, 55 plus. The development is what we're seeing in the United States, as reported by the Washington Post a couple of days ago, that people in their 30s and 40s, relatively young, are showing up with this this condition, being afflicted by strokes. When it comes to strokes, be they as a result of COVID-19 or life stresses, time is of the essence. You heard Muri say, time is brain. So this is one of these situations where people have to move very, very fast and get the medical attention they need. And also, again, we keep stressing that this is not a virus. It is not a disease that anybody should play with. It is having a wide range of responses, of impacts on the human body. So we wanted to bring that home to you by having that conversation with Muri about youngish people showing up with strokes as a result of coronavirus. Okay. All right. We're going to move on and shift gears a little bit now, because, as you just heard from that conversation with Maria, this is a really scary situation we're in. This virus is deadly. It is having a huge array of impacts, and a lot of people are scared. Adults are scared. So are children. Children are scared too, and they're trying to figure this out. It's quite clear in how we cater to the adult market and how we get the message across to them. But what about kids? How do we help them make sense of what is happening? They are the most vulnerable. How do we help them understand what a virus is and why they shouldn't touch their faces and why they should wash their hands? Well, I guess the key to all of that would be speaking in their own language in a way that they can understand. Take a look at this clip.
Habib, where do you think you're going?
Stay out of my way. I'm going to play football with my friends, and there's nothing you can...
Silence! You think this is funny, eh? You can get the deadly coronavirus.
The gorilla virus?
No, the coronavirus. Do you know what will happen when you do? Do you?
Huh? What will happen?
You will bring the coronavirus home and then infect everyone. Mommy will be sick, no more jollof rice.
Huh?
Daddy will be sick, no more going out to see movies.
Oh no! Not the movies, no!
Even worse, the government will come and take Mommy and Daddy away.
You're just making it up.
No, I'm not.
Yes, you are.
See for yourself.
Okay, it's real. What should we do?
The coronavirus is out there. We should stay at home for now. Always wash our hands with soap and water so we can prevent it from spreading.
Boo! Stay home, stay safe from all of us at Ant Hill Studios.
That is just brilliant. And the man behind that is Nigerian filmmaker Ni Akimoleyan. You may know him as the director of the hugely successful Wedding Party 2. He joins us now from Lagos. Ni, welcome.
Hello.
Hi. Can I just say, it's beautiful. The animation is beautiful. To hear the names Funke and Habib, to see those beautiful brown complexions, to hear jollof rice in an animation, it's just absolutely beautiful. Tell me about the idea for the series of films. I mean, talk to me about how this all started.
Okay, so just like everywhere else in the world, it was very obvious Nigeria was going to go into a lockdown. It was inevitable. But I think a week before the actual lockdown, they had to shut down schools. So all the schools, closed. And I have a 5-year-old who is very inquisitive. That's about the age, right? And I had to go through the stress of explaining to him, so there's 2 explanations. Number 1, we can't go out. Daddy can't go out. You can't go out. And number 2, everyone has to wash their hands. Okay, and he's a kid, so he's not going to buy any scientific explanation, that I was trying really, really hard to make until, and so when your kid keep asking, you keep thinking of the next thing to come up with. And so I said, you know what, this virus is a big monster. So I realized kids understand what monsters are, right? It's a big monster, it's out there. If it catches you, you're going to fall sick. They said, okay, it's not going to catch me. Okay, fine. If it catches daddy and mommy, the authorities will come and take them away, and you're not going to see them for a while. That was when he got scared.
Traumatized the child.
And then he goes, oh, okay, so fine. So he actually asked the question, so what are we going to do? And I said, okay, the first thing is go into the bathroom and wash your hands and we can talk. And when it happened, I started thinking, oh my God, how are parents dealing with this? I think I put a tweet out, just asking people randomly how they're dealing with explaining to their kids. And I realized that it might be an opportunity there to do something, because we're an animation studio, but we've only done like small bits of animation for advertising and all that. But we're really passionate about storytelling in animation. And I thought, you know what, maybe a few people would see it. Maybe it would be on WhatsApp and the likes. But I'm going to do an animation with kids. I'm going to do it in English, in Yoruba, in Hausa, in Igbo. And luckily, prior to that, I got all the animators in the studio to go home with their workstations. So I just reached out to them via Zoom, and we started working, together. I wrote the script. I called my wife. She voiced Funke. I voiced Habib. And that's how it started. Yes, I was the voice of Habib.
I think I can hear it. Just a little bit. How have they been received? Talk to me about the reception there in Nigeria and everywhere that they're seeing them.
Oh, so it's massive. The first thing that happened where most of the TV houses saw a great opportunity there, but initially they thought I was asking for money, and then they realized that I put the whole thing out free. So what they did was, like, we have the biggest cable operator, DSTV. They put it on all their African Magic channels, in all the local languages, all the terrestrial stations.
Wow.
What I did was that I also created like small WhatsApp versions, because gossip spreads very fast via WhatsApp in Nigeria. And you thought that, the channel that is making all this gossip move fast, you could also use it to pass some really great information. Now, the feedback I've been getting from parents have been the most exciting one. The first thing they say is, we're running out of soap. Because
now they're just washing their hands non-stop.
Yeah, so they would see the clip, they go wash their hands, they come back, see the clip again, go wash their hands, and all that. So that, and of course, data, because kids constantly watch and watch and watch.
Oh my goodness. Now, people are asking whether they can get this on YouTube. A lot of people are just saying how much they love it. Someone just wrote in and said, please tell me how I can get it so that my kid can stop pestering me. Yes, Desmond can. Can you please share this video so my son will stop pestering me to go out as we used to do? So how can people get hold of it if they're not in Nigeria?
So it's on YouTube, actually. It's on YouTube if you want it. But if you search me, Akimolayo, on any of the social media channels, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, you would see it. On Instagram, it's right up there, link in bio. On Twitter, it's a pinned tweet, but you could just reach out to me and I would send you, the files. What we've also done is that I created a folder where we actually have the music and sound effects files separately in case you want to do it in another language. So we've had people do it in French, in Swahili.
That's amazing.
In Portuguese. And recently someone reached out from Denmark and said they were going to do a Scandinavian version of it. So yeah, that's also available. But the most important thing for me is that there are 2 Black kids talking to all the children of the world, looking like Black kids with the big Afro hair. That was really special, to me.
So what comes next, Nee? Will there be more? I mean, I'm putting more work on you so that you can burn more parents' data. What are you going to do next?
Well, so the government lightened the lockdown a bit this weekend, and what they did was that they made it compulsory for everyone to wear face masks. So we've been thinking maybe that's something we can play with, get the kids to ensure their parents use face masks. And we've actually built a short script around that. And we'll come up with something very soon.
Oh, that's fantastic.
That will be a follow-up, yeah.
That's fantastic, and we definitely, when you've got that done, we'll reach out to get you to come on and talk to us about that.
No problem.
Congratulations, and it's such beautiful work, and you're absolutely right. Even as an adult, it really tugged my heartstrings to see, Black children on screen and in all their agency and beauty. So, Nia Kimoleon, thank you for that work.
Aisha, I'm a big fan, so this is actually a fan moment. I told my wife, oh my God, it's Isha Sesay!
Thank you for that moment, Nick. Please stay safe and come back and see us again soon, please.
I will. Thank you. Thank you very
Take
much.
Care.
Bye.
Take care. Bye. So yes, you can go on YouTube to get those videos and take a look at them and share them with your children and your friends' kids, because they are absolutely beautiful. Aminata Radai says thanks for making it free. Jella saying great job. Eugene's in the house, first time with us, saying please make me feel welcome. You're most welcome, Eugene. Welcome to the show. TJ Payne also welcome and saying brilliant. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being with us, all of you. Before we go, I want to bring you up to speed very quickly with 5 stories that we believe you should be paying attention to on this Monday. The first one, African countries placing those orders for these coronavirus tonics, these drinks that have been made in Madagascar. You've heard us talk about it throughout the show. President Rajoelina out there saying that these things cure people, that they have preventive properties. There has been no disclosed scientific data to support that. The Africa CDC reaching out to them saying, show us what you have, show us what data you've collected. I should point out that President Rajoelina says clinical trials will begin next week. Nonetheless, we have African leaders reaching out to Rajoelina to order these drinks. In my view, it's wrong-headed. If you hear what the head of Africa CDC is saying, let good science dictate what we do on the continent. There is no data to back this up. At this point in time, our leaders should be looking at getting testing kits, not tonics. All right. The other story that you should be paying attention to right now on the continent involves the situation in Nigeria and Kano and those mystery deaths. On this Monday, you may be aware that Nigeria is easing the lockdown in Lagos, Abuja, and Ogun states, and people are now free to move around somewhat with some level of restrictions. In Kano, Nigeria's most populous state in the north, there have been a spate of deaths in recent days. There had been speculation whether the deaths were due to COVID-19. We're hearing from a presidential task force from their head that indeed that is the case, though the final report has not been released. But it is increasingly, as asserted by this gentleman, that Dr. Nasiru Sanigwazo, he's quoted as saying that is the reason these people have been dying, at least some of them. It is because of COVID-19. He also said this that I want to leave you with. It is necessary for the people of Kano to wake up from their slumber. This is a serious situation. Story number 3 that I want to bring you, a story out of Ivory Coast. And let me ask you this. When is it not a good time to take a trip for a medical treatment? When is it not a good time to go abroad and take a trip to get your health checked when you're a member of government? I suspect now is not a good time. In the middle of a pandemic, when the people in your country are facing fear and uncertainty as to whether they'll pull through this situation, now is not the time for the Ivorian Prime Minister to show up in Paris for health checks. That's what's happening there, and it's raising eyebrows in that country. People wondering why he's chosen to go abroad for health checks at this moment in time. To give you some perspective, Ivory Coast currently has 1,398 confirmed cases of coronavirus and 17 deaths. And the Prime Minister, as we understand it, is in Paris for health checks. Story number 4 to tell you about Kenya. There is the threat of a strike by nurses in Kenya. They are threatening to walk off the job in 2 weeks if they are not given coronavirus risk pay. They're looking for coronavirus risk allowance. They say if they don't get it, they will walk off the job. This is just adding to the Kenyan government's problems. Over the weekend, they tried to put together mass testing there in Kenya. The numbers were somewhat underwhelming, according to local media. The government had been hoping for thousands of people to show up. Instead, a few hundred turned up. One of the things that's being reported in local media is people there on the ground in Kenya is saying that they didn't want to turn up and get tested because they fear that if they are indeed positive or show symptoms of this, they will end up being sent off to quarantine and have to pay for it. And finally, Rwanda. Rwanda is ending its lockdown after 45 days. There are some restrictions in place. There's a nighttime curfew. The same in South Africa. On this Monday, people are going back to work again with some restrictions on transportation, and also social distancing rules still apply. I'm going to leave you with this simple thought. I've repeated it throughout the show. Dr. Nkengasong, the head of the Africa CDC, said, let science dictate what we're doing. So even when it comes to the lockdowns, the curfews, and when it certainly comes to looking to countries like Madagascar and their claims of cures, let good science dictate the decisions that are made on the continent. Before we go quickly, I want to leave you with the bright side, because no matter what's happening on the continent, it's important that we bring you some opportunity to smile, some opportunity to be hopeful and joyful, because it's critical. That's the only way we're going to get through this as a community, holding on to our joy and humanity. Today, we're going to bring you an amazing contemporary artist, Hassan Hajjaj. He's best known for his series called Kesh Angels, and where he captures the street culture out of Morocco, out of Marrakesh to be specific. He's going to give us some insight into his life in quarantine right now. Take a look.
Hi, my name's Hassan Hajjaj. I'm here to just talk a little bit about what I've been doing in this lockup. I think like everybody else, first thing was a bit of a shock, then I suppose organising, adjusting and trying to stay safe and healthy. I've been doing lots of stuff at home, more cooking like everybody else, and I've been also trying to do a catch up with editing and cleaning up, and have a bit of a time to breathe between all this. Anyway, tonight I will be with Isha Sesay, 9 o'clock UK time. Hopefully you can be with us. Take care, stay healthy, stay safe, and please keep the love out there.
Yeah, indeed. And that does it for today's show here. Whether you've been watching us on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube, that's it. Thank you for spending time with me here. You can keep this conversation going. I'm going to be on Instagram with Hassan Hajjaj in about a minute. So tune in there at I am Isha Sesay. But for Home with Isha Sesay, that does it. I'll be back here, same time, same place tomorrow. Set your alarms. See you soon. Be safe, everyone. Thanks for joining us.